Everybody, and thank you for joining the latest in the Tango mini webinar series. If you missed any of our previous webinars, then we will be sending a link afterwards to this particular one where you can find the slides on SlideShare and the video recordings on Vimeo, and you'll be able to access our previous webinar recordings there as well. You can also visit tango.com/reef, where you will find our new Programmatic Mind section, where we curate all of the content that Tango produces as well as valuable content from across the industry. My name is Max Hammond, part of the founding team and Chief Revenue Officer here at Tango. For those of you that haven't joined us before, then we call this a mini webinar on purpose. We recognize your time is valuable and you probably don't want to spend a whole hour of your life sat here listening to webinar today. And so our goal is to try and get you on and off the phone in less than 30 minutes, probably including questions. Now that said, sometimes on these webinars we do have a lot of questions that continue to come in after the 30-minute mark, and so I will stay on the line and continue to answer those. A small administrative point. In your interface screen, probably down in the bottom left-hand corner, you will find a chat and question interface. Please feel free to answer questions at any time during the webinar, depending on what slide we're on and what the topic is at the time. In relation to when the question comes in, then I may tackle it immediately at that point. Have no fear, we will come back to your question at the end of the session. Without further ado, let's begin our topic today, which is the programmatic marketing opportunity. And when we do the preparation for these webinars, we always put out questions to people, either over email, over Twitter, or Facebook, or through tango.com/resources, and that asks for people's input and guidance on exactly what they'd like to hear when we put out each topic description. What was fascinating in this case was the significant amount of variance that we got in the level of understanding around programmatic. There is a great skepticism in the industry about these terms because I think they are being misused and used in many different ways by many different people. And I think today what we're going to do in light of those questions is we're going to have a little bit of a level set here. I'm going to spend 2 or 3 minutes just talking about what Tango is and where we fit into this world. And then we're going to demystify programmatic and big data and give you something easy to understand and to use going forward. I'm then going to tell you a little bit of a story, a day in individual in a not future programmatic world, so you know what it is aiming for, and then give you some real-life use cases around first-party data and third-party data, as well as even defining what those are, going to be something that caused some points. And just before I dive in with the next slide, there are several other people who just managed to come in on the dial-in. So for those of you that just joined, down in the bottom left-hand corner of your interface, you will see a chat and question interface that enables you to engage with me during the presentation, and we'll come to your questions. So a quick 2 or 3 minutes on Tango. We are a technology company that has been built from the beginning to help our clients get ahead of their competition. And whilst we have 50% of our company, we recognize that marketers don't just need more technology. What marketers need is the right technology that actually makes a difference to their business, but also they have a lot of hand-holding, a lot of education, and a very high quality of service. And that is where typically we win. We've had some amazing successes. We work with more than 75 of the top 500 retailers in North America. We also have extensive experience in every other vertical. We power everything that is programmed for some of the largest companies in the world, and we work with people in a variety of ways, whether it be full serve direct, or also providing access to our to our self-serve capability and interfaces. So the full spectrum is covered across our client base. Now, what does it look like when someone engages with Tango? What are they actually doing? Well, typically we fall into the 3 main buckets. We are there to do brand awareness, we're there to do prospecting, and we're there to do a much more efficient version of retargeting in comparison to what most marketers are doing today. And we wrap all that up with very detailed, in-depth audience insights that not only feed the circle again, but also close a lot of gaps in the minds of marketers about who their audience are. We just had one question come in from a participant saying that it sounds like the audio is cutting in and out a little. Hopefully that's an isolated case. Please do use your chat interface if you are struggling with the audio, and let us know. Behind the scenes, what is the Tango technology? Well, it's the industry's first programmatic marketing platform. The easy way to think about this, for those of you familiar with the world of ad tech, is think of everything about a data management platform, a DMP, for bringing data together, and everything of a DSP, or a demand-side platform, for doing the media. Put those two together. And why do we do that? Well, there's a lot of organizations using DSPs today who are buying real-time media but are not using real-time data. They are in fact using pre-processed, out-of-date segments and are therefore losing a lot of the efficiency. If anyone would like more information on that, then please feel free to reach out. So that's enough about Tango for the time being. Let's move on and talk a little bit about our terms here of programmatic marketing and big data. Big data, first of all, I think is being very overused. I'm fortunate to have a lot of conversations with CMOs of large established brands, and there is I think a perception of arrogance about the digital industry, and the fact that we created this idea of using lots of data in marketing. Well, the reality is, if you look across the big financial institutions, big retailers like Sears, these companies have had data for marketing for longer than most of us have been born. And so the term is certainly being misused. The way to think about big data within the context of digital marketing is that it probably means you're using more data than you were yesterday. And what do we mean by that? Well, there's the old adage of right time, right place, right person, right message. Well, now we also have to factor in right price, because the media we typically buy is in an auction. We need to understand what is the right price at that right moment to talk to any individual. So the simple way to think about big data is it's more data than you're using today. Problem is that data is probably dispersed. It sits on your site. It sits in a CRM system. It may even be in offline contact files. And so it's not actionable, and it's very difficult to bring it together. And that is where programmatic marketing comes in. The promise of programmatic marketing is that it will help you bring these different disparate data sources together and make it actionable so you as a marketer can actually get something done. Now, this has started, of course, within the display world. It started with the rise of the exchanges about 5 years ago. Media exchanges, of course, just being the big pots of media that we can buy. And people talk about comparisons to the NASDAQ and that sort of thing to the exchanges. The thing you need to be aware of around them is that what they did was they separated the data, i.e. how you're making the decision on who to buy, from the actual media targeting. And that means that now, instead of shouting at the crowds, we're talking to individuals based on what we know about them. And that world started with remnant display, as it's called, and moved quickly into premium. And there's several major companies now who've had headlines over the last year or so about moving all of their inventory into the exchanges. Mobile, social, video came along very quickly afterwards, but this is also moving into other areas. Out of home, there's some crazy ideas around print, which are interesting, TV, RFID chips that we're going to talk about in a moment. And that is where an organization like Tango has to be built to scale into, but you as a marketer also need to have your data ready for the same type of world. And what might this world look like? Well, there's a lot of fuss and discussion around glass at the moment, so we thought we'd incorporate that in our daily story here. We're going to take our imaginary character. Her name is Felicity. Every morning she goes out for a run before she goes to work, and on this particular occasion, Felicity came home, and the sensor in her running shoes has already sent a message to her running app that's telling her that her shoes are down and she needs to consider replacing them. Into work in New York, she puts on glass and she begins the search for a pair of new running shoes. The brand New Balance, in this particular story, decide to show her an SEM based on that search, but she chooses to ignore it and doesn't engage with that brand at the time. As unfortunately can happen in New York, the subway is running late, and she comes out of the subway and decides to hail a cab to get to work quicker. When she jumps in the cab, instead of seeing a generic video message on the screen on the back of the seat in front of her, the RFID chip in her phone has communicated with that TV screen. And a live auction has taken place, probably only milliseconds long like it is with display media. And New Balance have decided to bid on the opportunity to show Felicity a video about their running shoes because of the search she did earlier that morning on her Google Glass. Now, we get into the realms of what's possible and what's not at this point, and we think of a world where all marketing interfaces could become real-time. There is nothing to say that the ad server that sits in that video screen in the cab is not also broadcasting her ID to the billboards owned by the same company, and in aggregate they are assessing what is the message to show best at that time. And in this case, New Balance have taken the decision to change some billboards on her journey to work to show them her shoes, giving her further interaction. And of course, when Felicity does get to work, she then does what most of us do, which is she checks Facebook first. And of course, we have the Facebook Exchange now, which enables us to bring third-party data into it to decide who to target with what, and New Balance populate her newsfeed and her right-hand side rail ads with their message. And at that point, she's still not really engaging with the brand, but she's certainly becoming very aware. Now, the radio is on in Felicity's office, and it's detecting the RFID chip, the unique identifiers that are in the cell phones of everybody in that location. It's deciding in aggregate what video ad would be most efficient for the audience that surrounds it. And of course, most people, Felicity has her cell phone with her constantly, and so that gives further opportunities for brands like New Balance to engage with her at any point that they wish to. Now, at the moment in our story, we've talked about how programmatic is really going to look from an advertising point of view. I'm sure most of you on this call are aware of the idea of 3D printing. At the moment, 3D printing is pretty darn cool. If you haven't seen it in action, I highly encourage you do. But it is quite slow, but it will get quicker and quicker as these things do. There is an argument that says, well, why not build programmatic rules based on what we know Felicity likes, perhaps colors, we know her shoe size, etc., and the likelihood that if we can get her to come into a store and see the shoe in the exact format she'd like it, would she finally engage with the New Balance brand and make her purchase? But she's walking down the high street from her office at lunchtime. She's coming close to a department store, and they choose to quickly create a simple prototype in the color she'd like, and they pop it up in the window as Felicity starts to look in there. Finally, as she comes inside, she engages with the New Balance brand by making her purchase. Now, all of that is based on data about Felicity. We need to know her likes, we need to know her needs, and in this case her need is new shoes as told by technology. We need to know what she's looking for, and we need to know the moment she has the intent that she's likely to convert. All of that falls into this classification of big data, albeit a little bit in the future from what we have access to today. Programmatic is being used there to determine rules and assess value and likelihood that Felicity would engage at any single point in the day. Now, all of that sounds great, but in many ways that sounds significantly irritating. You get on the tube and you're doing a search for not in London. You get on this subway in New York and you do a search, and the rest of your day is saturated by New Balance. Well, this is a problem that many of you have probably experienced when you've gone online to a retailer and you feel as though you've been stalked. And I always love to use this slide to make this point. Stalking is when two people go for a long romantic walk together, but only one of them knows about it. As marketers, you don't want to be stalked. You want to be adding value. You want to be serving up the touch point when it has value. You do not want to be giving somebody a negative experience. And at the moment, that's one of the key points that most marketers are missing out on. They're forgetting the fact that programmatic is about being more efficient, not about serving more ads. And as an industry, particularly with companies trying to IPO at the moment, there's an obsession with the idea that you have to keep increasing these budgets and serve more and more impressions to the right people. Quite the opposite. What you want to be doing is serving the right amount of ads to each individual. Now, there are some interesting cases that I just wanted to drop in here about how people are already using data in some of these forms of advertising, so you don't think I'm too crazy with our story here about Felicity. One of my favorites is this billboard in London at the moment, where when you stand in front of it, it scans your face and determines your gender. If you're a woman, it will play you a 30-second video from a charity that is trying to fight for women's rights in very emerging countries. If you're a man and it detects your face, then it will show you about 5 seconds of that video, and then it will cut out, and a message will appear saying, now you know it's to be a woman in some of these countries who is denied access to the same information as you. Very smart, very targeted, very impactful use of data and rules-based decisioning. And of course, for Felicity's story to be true, at the moment we talk about cell phones, but probably cell phones won't look like cell phones in the not too distant future. I came across this company in Texas who is implanting RFID chips under people's skin in their hands. They're doing it purely for the moment at the purpose of allowing them to open their gun safe quicker without needing to use a key. However, for those of you who have a car that has keyless entry, that's an RFID chip that's doing that. For those of you who have a phone that isn't an iPhone, you have an RFID chip that allows you to communicate and share files with other people. A lot of Wi-Fi cameras now have an RFID chip that allows you to automatically share files from one device to another. What's to say that we as individuals won't have our own RFID chip, our own unique identifier, and instead of going to the car dealership and being given a set of keys when you buy a car, instead they ask you for your ID number and code the car to you. This is a significant touch point that is already happening. People are doing this. There's a nightclub in Sweden doing this just for VIP access. This is the kind of level of craziness that it seems like we're already getting into. And so when you think about this world, hopefully your takeaway here is that you really can't ignore this idea of big data. And again, I use the term big data because it's what people are becoming familiar with, but think back to our definition. It's not something new, it's not something scary. Big data in our context simply means more data than you're probably using today for your marketing. Look like? Well, typically, it's going to fall into two buckets, what is called first-party data and what is called third-party data. First-party data is what you know and you have about your consumers, but the most valuable source of data that you can have access to for your advertising and for your marketing. This is anything from the CRM data. This is anything from past transactions that people have made with you. This is the visits that they've made to your page, and hopefully the light bulb's going off for some of you. If this is visits to the page, then an execution of this is site retargeting. And that's right. Whilst you might not realize it, site retargeting is just using the first-party data alone to be, has somebody come to my site and left before doing what I wanted them to do. There's also first-party data that you probably have that you don't realize you have access to. So CRM data. Within the education lead generation space, it's common that affiliates will send applicants to the various schools, and they will come with an offline form. We and others guess that offline data, and we can match it to an online cookie with about a 50% success rate. So you could come along with 100,000 names and addresses, and we can find those people for you online and allow you to draw the dots between your offline first-party data for targeting online. All of that's yours, and all of that typically is free for you to at least get access to. Third-party data falls into many, many buckets. For us as a company, we happen to be the largest source of search data outside of Google, and that's a third-party data source that our customers use regularly. Other third-party data sources come from people like Excelate and BluePie and come in many forms. It could be demographic information, something as simple as gender, could be household income, could be the propensity of somebody to buy something right now. A lot of the auto brands buy third-party data segments, for instance, of people who are currently shopping around for a car. But there are also kind of second-party points of data, and this is another term that has been misunderstood yet seems to be gaining in popularity. Many years ago, I used to have a ski resort client when I was on the agency side, and the ski resort is airlines selling tickets to get people to the resort. The airline is reliant on people wanting to go to the resort, and both are reliant on people being able to find accommodation within the ski resorts. And so what we did was we cookied or pixeled an airline site, a ski resort site, and the local hotel sites, and we allowed them each to target each audience based on various rules. That, in effect, is second-party data because it's giving access to its first-party data to the hotels and the ski resorts and vice versa. Really, access to data and efficiency is only limited by your imaginations, and there is no reason why you can't go out and do similar partnerships within your industries. Then of what you do with that data is interesting. At the moment, a lot of you will be on this call because of the idea of display banners, but there is also FBX, which we're going to touch on in a moment, and many other sources coming, as you saw from Felicity's story. Tango was recently announced as powering Twitter's new ad solutions ahead of their IPO, and so who knows that further down the line exactly what format that will take on, but that's a very unique type of execution using your first-party and third-party data that now becomes available to you. How do you get this data? Well, firstly, we touched briefly on this idea of CRM data. That can be expensive and a little bit cumbersome. There's companies out there, LiveRamp is a good example, others are escaping me at the moment, where we pass these files to of offline data, and they specialize in matching that against online cookies. It's the cheapest thing to do, but it's a relatively simple process for you to go through, and once we're integrated with a company like that, it becomes easier for you. A lot of your first-party data can be passed with a cookie or a pixel, which you place on your site, and that can capture the pages that people view, therefore the products that they view if you're an e-com site, the time of day they like to come, the day of week, whatever point of information that pixel can see, that can be collected. Now, some of that data is not quite so straightforward, and so a lot of our clients choose to work with what's called a tag management partner. For those of you unfamiliar with this concept, it's a piece of technology that instead of you having to put all the pixels directly on your site, then you can put them inside this third-party company's technology. And they're already integrated with companies like Tango and are used to passing us the sort of data that we want to. And we've listed out 4 examples here: Tilium, Tagman, BrightTag, Coremetrics, but there's many others available out there. And Sighton's one that I can think of that's not on this list. And they can have conversations with you about helping you get some of your data together and pass it to somebody like Tango. I thought it interesting, based on some of the questions for the preparation we got, to talk about, well, what do we do with this? Well, of course, it goes without saying that data sits in our system and remains private to every individual client. But in addition to that, we buy these across many, many, many exchanges, and I listed some of them out here: AppNexus, AppMeld, OpenX, AdX. Some of these will be familiar. We have to make sure our ID is synchronized with your ID and is synchronized with the ID across all of these exchanges. And so, very briefly, whenever we show impressions or have a touch point for your audience, we're making sure those IDs are synchronized so that we can follow the same person across many different places and can do things like universal frequency capping so that we're not stalking people like we showed in Felicity's story today. And on that topic of not wanting to stalk people, it's my belief that this world of site retargeting is fundamentally broken. There are so many organizations, particularly companies who all they do is specialize in site retargeting, whose obsession is to try and get the marketer to spend more, not spend smarter. And that's bad for the marketer. As we saw in Felicity's story, you don't want to keep saturating someone. Once someone's made a purchase, they don't want to hear from you again immediately. And chances are they don't actually need to hear from you anywhere near as often as they were doing beforehand, certainly depending on what it is that you're providing. And so site retargeting done properly with this idea of programmatic brings in more data to help you make smarter decisions. Some great examples: if you're Mercedes and somebody is searching for bad debt at 2 in the morning, why are you still site retargeting them? Sure, they may have gone through your car configurator, but it doesn't mean to say they have the means or the inclination to buy a car right now. You just eliminated some wasted budget based on third-party data. So the promise of programmatic site retargeting is that it will typically reduce your spend and free up budget spend elsewhere, but generate more conversions than you're getting today. And typically when we inherit a site retargeting campaign for a brand, then we find that we reduce the budget by about 40% inside of 60 days and can then help that client either invest that money in prospecting or branding, or they can simply take that budget back in-house and spend it how they wish. And you can always find out more information about programmatic site retargeting on the site. One quick question. Selena, I noticed you asked a question which I'm not quite understanding. If you could just take a moment and provide some more information on that as I come to the questions in a moment, I'll happily tackle that one for you. Now, there's many sources of third-party data, as we touched on, and we said that one of our sources of search data is search data. And we have a massive amount of this. I mean, it's billions and billions of searches that we see every month. And we're being asked a lot at the moment, well, what about the recent Google announcement? Well, there's lots of ways to gather search data, whether it be direct or whether it be implied, and we're not seeing any impact for this on the future of our business, having planned for this coming along ever since Google announced secure search. What it does mean is that brands can come to us and tell us who they're trying to target and context, and we can match their needs against the keywords, very much like SEM in some ways, but you have to remember this is still a display buy. And we can match keywords against display ads. So if you're a department store and you're selling shoes, for instance, and people are out there searching for men's shoes, we can find those people who've never engaged with your department store brand before and show them your ad and include dynamic content this for men's shoes. So search data, very highly effective source of third-party data. And this concept is called search retargeting. I'll tell you, we often joke that targeting as a name is our blessing and our curse. If we could start this little micro-industry again, we'd never have used the term search retargeting. The reason being is that when people hear it, they automatically and quite rightfully in some ways assume we're talking about site retargeting, whereas what we're actually talking about is retargeting the event that someone has searched. They have typically not visited a client site, and so this is a prospecting vehicle finding brand new people. So it seems our next slide, for some reason, the interface that we're using here for ReadyTalk doesn't want to render the image. So we have an extremely beautiful and well-designed slide representing video, and all you're going to see of it is the word video. So the point we were going to make with this slide is that programmatic is not just something for direct response. One of the fastest growing areas for us is programmatic video. And it's being used in the way that you expect it to, which is for increasing awareness and brand recognition and filling and broadening the funnel. And so suddenly now programmatic's moved out of the world of the search marketer or retargeter, moving very much to the broader marketing concept. So programmatic video, again, is the same sort of idea. It is more efficiency. Instead of trying to guess or serving ads to broad audiences, now you're cherry-picking those individuals who are most likely to respond and engage with you. And of course that's important because video advertising is not the cheapest thing to buy. And then for our last slide, I wanted to touch on the Facebook exchange because it seems like there's still a lot of confusion around Facebook exchange and how that applies to this world of programmatic and data. So the simple way to think about Facebook exchange is just as another media source. When they first launched the exchange, it was the ads down the right-hand side, and now it is also newsfeed. And down the right-hand side is bought on a CPM basis, and down the middle in news on insertion basis. That simply means that you're paying to have it posted into someone's newsfeed. They're going to see it at least once. They may actually see it more than once, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. A couple of advantages to using Facebook exchange sources. Individuals do tend to convert very well here. It seems to be a little bit more of a passive audience. They're not determined to get task done when browsing Facebook, and so seem to notice the advertising, particularly newsfeed. Now, what data can you hear? Well, all the types of data that we were talking about you can start to marry together into one single execution type. So we talked about first-party data and the people who visited your pages. We talked about CRM data that you've onboarded and made that your digital first-party data. You can use that to target your individuals with Facebook. You can also use third-party data, such as our search data that Tango has, or you can go to either leverage a platform or go direct to other third-party data sources and bring those into the equation and do your targeting that way. Whilst it might seem a little alien, whilst it might seem social, the way to think is just simply media or rather than something complicated or standalone. And so at that point, as per our promise, we're kind of wrapping up before the half-hour point, and I'll start taking questions. There will be, several of you are asking questions about a recording and a deck. At the end of the presentation, an email will be sent to you with links to both SlideShare and Vimeo, but I also encourage you to visit chango.com/resources, where you will find not only this presentation, but also our previous presentations. We're also the author and deliverer of the only industry magazine called Programmatic Mind, which is the second quarterly edition has just been released, and you can download a PDF version of that from the site. So let's looking at some of the questions that have come in here. One here from Brian: is your programmatic retargeting geared for publishers like an audience accelerator, or is it a program that advertisers would sign up for? Great question, Brian. Both is the simple answer, depending on who you are and what you're trying to do. In the context that I was talking about today, I was thinking more about marketers and advertisers who want to do retargeting. However, we actually have some of the world's largest publishers, one of the top 4, I would certainly put them in, using the Tango platform, part self-serve, part full-serve, in order to do audience extension or audience accelerator, as you were talking about. And because our platform operates in a fully transparent manner, which is going to be rare to find anywhere else, then it's very appealing to marketers because there's no crazy hidden margins and nonsense like that. So either circumstance, and if you want to reach out for more specifics in relation to what you're trying to do, then very happy to address those for you. Question from Franco: is it better to optimize your display campaigns in the Google Display Network before working with programmatic buying? Well, Franco, it depends a lot on your budget and your goals. The Google Display Network is one source of inventory. And if you look across all the inventory available to us, including Facebook, then it's a very small percentage of the inventory that's actually available out there. When you're thinking about retargeting somebody either from first-party data or third-party data, the more chances you have to see somebody in a day, the less you have to bid or spend each time you see them. And so I would recommend that unless you're dealing with a very small budget, then it's best to always be fishing across all of the media sources and touch points for an individual rather than just one isolated case such as Google, because just working with Google is going to ultimately drive your costs up, reduce your return on investment. Next question here from Caroline is about dynamic creative. It's a great question. Creative should be relevant to the audience, and one of the advantages of programmatic and more data is it means that you can learn something about those individuals before serving them the creative. We have various capabilities built into the system. We also work with some fantastic partners, and it all really just comes down to what ultimately you're trying to do. Typically, I would say dynamic creative, there's a little bit of an obsession with it. You should do customized creative. It doesn't necessarily have to be down to the individual product level, and so you need to keep that in mind when you're planning out that type of buying. Question from Selena: why buy versus build? And I think that came in when we were talking about data. Selena, feel free to ping me another question or comment if that's not what you meant. With regards to data, I would always say build as much of your own first-party data as you possibly can, because it has significant value to you, and then leverage a platform like ours where your data is being used in real time at the same moment that you're doing the media buying, and you'll find that your efficiencies go through the roof. A lot of people switch from the big known DSP names out there to Tango, simply because they find that those technology platforms aren't leveraging the real-time data at the moment of the bid request, and when they do tests with us, find that the efficiency is pretty unique. And so it's keep focusing on your first-party data, keep bringing people into your retargeting pool, keep collecting what you can about those individuals, and then leverage a technology that helps you really get the most out of that. Another question here, does Tango use any attribution modeling? We've had a very difficult time attributing much value to our view-through conversions, even after running our own PSA list tests in-house. Franco, feel free to reach out to me, dax@tango.com, and I'll be happy to help you with that. Further, to answer your question directly, I think this industry is a little bit broken in terms of the measurement options available to you. It's good to hear you've done PSA tests. We have that capability built in and can guide you through that. I always like to take the example of, for marketers, 0% view-through is incorrect, right? Those marketers that are measuring on just the last click only are missing the point. We know that view-through has an impact because we know advertising in general works. Otherwise, TV and out-of-home simply wouldn't happen, and they're tracked very well, and lots of studies demonstrate the value of those. However, I'm also quite happy to admit that any number near 100% is also incorrect for view-through attribution. And depending on how well-known your brand is, then the percentage is going to be somewhere from a couple of percent all the way up to the 80s or 90s. I mean, if you're Google, for instance, then you're going to get very little incremental value from encouraging people by showing them ads to say, come search on Google. If you're Bing, then that's going to be a slightly different story because the awareness and usage of that brand isn't as high. I would say you could do the same comparison with a Bloomingdale's department store. You don't need much encouragement to get people to come back and shop there if they already have already, in comparison to a little independent store on someone's corner that most people have never heard of. And so those studies should help you determine the right view-through percentage. Quite happy to help you work through that if you want to reach out direct for your specific circumstance. And it looks like that's the end of our questions here. As I say, an email will be sent to you with links to tango.com/resources as well as Vimeo and SlideShare. My contact details are on the screen here. Feel free to reach out at any time with any questions. And of course, if you're interested in Tango helping you with programmatic or big data, then you can reach us to tango.com or again, just reach out to me directly. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. An email will be sent to you with details of our next mini webinar.
Thank you. Please stand by.